41-year-old female who is a housewife in 20 days. In 1994, she had twin pregnancy, which was her second pregnancy. Due to unknown cause, one of the twins died in intrauterine. Normal vaginal delivery, according to her sister. She got slightly depressed and was not a normal person since then. In 2015, she was brought to here to gynecology OP as she had bleeding per vagina for 5 days with history of white discharge, which is watery in consistency, non-foul smelling, not red stained. Her menstrual history, she bleeds for 10 days, which was heavy bleeding. Ops history P2 L2. In 2019, she had complaints of fever, got admitted here in this hospital for 1 month, during which she also got referred to psychiatry as she couldn't recognize anyone, which lasted for 5 days. Patient was apparently asymptomatic 25 days in 2020. Then she developed fever, high grade, progressive, not associated with chills and rigors, for which she went to local RMP and is on fluids for 1 whole day. Next day she had vomitings. She used to vomit everything after eating like contents of food particles. Again went to RMP and got treated accordingly. As the condition did not regress, she was admitted in this hospital for 1 week, after which she became normal. After 4 days, she again developed vomitings after eating 3 to 4 times a day, and she is admitted in the hospital and on fluids for 2 days, after which she came here for further development, further treatment. General examination, patient is drowsy, semi-conscious, not cooperative during admission. Her blood pressure was 90 by 60 mmHg, pulse rate 98 beats per minute, GRBS 99, respiratory rate 20 cycles per minute, CVS S1 S2 heard, no murmurs, respiratory bilateral air sounds present, CNS sensory cannot be elicited, motor PAR cannot be elicited, tone normal, reflexes absent. Her GCS scale was E1, V3, M6.
Okay, so given this clinical findings and history, what will you all think? Traumatic. So do we have the CSF tab? Do we have the video? So I hope all of you can see this CSF puncture, because we will be asking you in the exam how to do a lumbar puncture. Unfortunately, the video is taken after all the main thing has happened. So you can only see the drops coming out, and you can see that it has been a traumatic puncture. RBCs are all there. So now it's coming clearer. See? So initially he has taken the RBC and kept it for CV net or something. Now he is taking the clearer fluid, which is also still hemorrhagic. Slowly it will become more clear as we move out of the vein, which it has inadvertently punctured. You see, but what is common, the disease is common, but the presentations are so very different. Each and every presentation of this disease is very different. So it's very difficult to diagnose in the beginning when you are not sure. But yes, some things are very strong markers of this, and one of this is the chest X-ray, because this invariably goes and affects the lungs. Because the route of entry of this organism is through the lungs. So once it enters the lungs, it affects certain lobes. Particularly, it has got a very strong predisposition to affect the upper lobe. And there are theories of oxygen concentrations in different lobes, because of which this organism is stimulated to go to a certain lobe. Now, what do you see in this X-ray? Can we make it clear? Now, can anybody tell us what do you see here? So, anybody can tell us what you are able to see in the X-ray? Very, very common disease, but see unusual presentation of this disease. So, this organism has disseminated into our body and probably into the meninges, which is causing this vomiting. How this chronic meningitis is causing vomiting? We would think of raised intracranial pressure. So, chronic raised intracranial pressure causing vomiting. That's one theory here, hypothesis. Other things could be it has disseminated to some other organ, which can also cause vomiting. That other organ, not only vomiting, it can cause hypotension. So, so what do you see in the X-ray? And of course, the X-ray is the most important way to diagnose them. Other than the CSF, which we have done, and we do have findings there suggestive of inflammation in the meninges. So the only way to prove meningitis is to do a CSF and show that there are cells more than 0 to 5. 0 to 5 cells would be normal, but if you do a CSF and it shows 100 cells, then definitely meningitis is there. So this patient had 200, of which we subtracted some for the RBCs, and she has got meningitis, chronic meningitis. They are lymphocytic predominant, so we think that it is supporting the diagnosis, which is also very, very prominent on the X-ray.
Right upper lobe and middle lobe homogeneous capacity due to TB.
Yeah, so why do you think it's due to TB and not COVID? Why can't it be COVID? So how would you know it's middle lobe, Sakshi? So why do you see the middle lobe in the chest X-ray? Yeah, can we take a look at the chest X-ray? Yeah, where is the middle lobe here? So what Sakshi meant was the middle zone actually. So yeah, the chest X-ray can be divided into upper zone, middle zone and lower zones. But the upper lobe, lower lobe, middle lobe is difficult to make out in the chest X-ray PA view alone because they are three-dimensional structures. So the middle lobe will be predominantly in the anterior part, lower lobe will be predominantly posterior. Now look at the upper lobe, Sakshi. This CT was done, of course, earlier, and the X-ray was done much later. So what you see in the X-ray is very different from what you see in the CT. The X-ray is showing a lot of progression, but in the CT you see a slightly earlier phase of her disease. But still the disease is very well captured in the CT as well. So yeah, maybe just look at the tip of the upper lobes. Both the upper lobes, they are showing, they should have been black at the tips near the trachea. If you see, they're all white out there. So there's a lot of disease activity there, a lot of inflammatory caseation, necrosis. Now let's go to this second one. Yeah, can you make it bigger? Yeah, look at the the amount of hyperdense lesions, yeah, caseation, and there is probably a cavity also there in that area. And so there's a lot of pixelation. So what we are showing in the early phase, which was done at that time the CT was done, there are a lot of cavitary lesions as well, along with caseation, and this is all suggestive of a pulmonary tuberculosis. Yes. So this lady has a pulmonary tuberculosis, and she has also developed dissemination from that side into chronic meningitis. And not only that, the tuberculosis is disseminated to other organs like the adrenal gland. So adrenal gland dissemination can cause classical Addison's disease and or adrenal insufficiency because of tuberculosis, which is unlike primary Addison's disease because primary is autoimmune and this one is because of tuberculosis. But yeah, both of them will cause features of Addison's in the sense that you can have similar features of Addison's, that is hypotension, vomiting, fever. All these things can be because of Addisonian crisis itself.
So on presentation, she just had vomitings and altered sensorium, and her outside lab report showed hypocalcemia. So when we got our reports done here, we had dyselectrolytemia, which we attributed to the vomiting. But we knew there was a CNS deficit, but before we could investigate her further, she went into a sudden cardiac arrest, the cause of which we thought could be the hypocalcemia, and we corrected the calcium with directly substituting calcium gluconate, and the hyponatremia also causes altered sensorium. So instead of a organic CNS deficit, we were thinking more in terms of electrolyte imbalance that has occurred due to chronic vomiting. So the sodium correction, as was discussed earlier for you all, we started her on 3% NaCl, and her sodium picked up within 24 hours from 117, it has become up to 125, and even then her sensorium remained the same, and for a span of one or 2 hours, when it was 117 to 119, there was no change in the sensorium, and post cardiac arrest, she also went into hypoxia and type 1 respiratory failure. So because of that, we had to intubate her, and then her GCS started deteriorating every day. Like yesterday, she was just intubated 6 hours 6 hours after that when we checked her GCS. So from 7 on her presentation, it was just 3. And today also there was anisocoria, but the brainstem reflexes are intact. Her dorsal is intact. She also has her gag reflex, but pupillary reaction is a little sluggish on the left. So that's when we went with an organic brain cause. And one more thing that supported disseminated TB was the hyponatremia that she had without that proportionate hypokalemia, because potassium is lost much more in vomiting compared to sodium, whereas for potassium it was less but not that much to cause her rest of the symptoms. So post CPR status, she is recovering cardiac wise, and her renal function is normal, liver function is normal. Then when we got the echo done post CPR, it showed reduced ejection fraction. She must be having a heart failure that got precipitated because of the arrest, and there was also mitral prolapse at the echo video. So that we couldn't really explain because it could be a rheumatic heart disease that.
Do we have the ego video?
Yes. That
Can we have a look?
cardiac arrest, her systolic and diastolic were good enough, not too low, but still it was categorized as hypotension. But post cardiac arrest, even with 2 inotropes, she wasn't having any response to that. There was no BP, there was no change in her systolic or diastolic, even with almost maximum dose of 2 inotropes that we used. One was noradrenaline and the other was vasopressor, that is vasopressin. So because of that, there was a suspicion of it could be an adrenal deficiency, and we started her on long-acting glucocorticoid.
Click on the video. Yeah, continue. You started on long-acting glucocorticoid.
Glucocorticoid, that is dexamethasone. It's a very potent glucocorticoid. So when you categorize it, its action almost lasts up to 32 hours, and 4 hours after the admission. Systolic was picked up, and it's around 90 now.